What is it that you want from sex? Do you want intimacy? Do you want closeness? Do you even want the experience to be of high quality? Do you want the person to pay attention to you? I mean, lust will get you somewhere, and it's not nothing, but it's by no means everything. And everyone knows this. People are lonely. Well, all that's going to do is make you hard and bitter, and I wouldn't recommend it. If you're abstinent because you're incapable, that is not a virtue. But you can't divorce something as miraculous as sexuality from your life. How are you going to do that? Well, you can trivialize it. It's nothing. Then you have nothing. So good luck with that. You're going to take one of the deepest sources of meaning that's available to you and turn it into nothing. Well, that's its own punishment. So then you integrate it into your life. Well, what do you want for your life? What is it that you want from sex? Do you want intimacy? Do you want closeness? Do you even want the experience to be of high quality? Do you want the person to pay attention to you? Well, they're going to have to care for you. I mean, lust will get you somewhere, and it's not nothing, but it's by no means everything. And everyone knows this. People are lonely, and they need someone to communicate with, and they need someone to tie themselves together with so their lives make a rope. They need someone to communicate when times are good and to share their triumphs, and they need someone to share their catastrophes, and they need a framework that's stable so that they can have children. And well, why would you have children? It's like, that's a stupid question. What else are you going to do? You know, I mean, there aren't that many things that make up your life. Now, you can get away with neither of those, but you better have a walloping career or a tremendous aptitude at something creative and remarkable. And maybe you can do that. Maybe that'll be enough for you. But I've seen that unidimensionality work out well and very, 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 very rarely. And you have children because you'll never have the opportunity in your life to have as high quality a relationship with anyone as you could potentially have with your child. So you're going to forego that? Well, you can, but what's left for you then? You know, I had men in my practice who were very successful, serially sexually active, and it didn't work for them very well. Now, I would say very forthrightly, if I had two men and all other things being equal, one was capable of serial sexual relationships and was attractive enough to manage that, and the other wasn't, that the person who managed to do that is more successful. I believe that. And so even if you're successful at what you pursue, say serial sexual satisfaction, it's like, well, if you're attractive and you have an endless array of willing females, it's a gateway to psychopathy as far as I'm concerned, because you have to divorce your sexuality from the humanity of the people that you're engaged with sexually. Well, all that's going to do is make you hard and bitter, and I wouldn't recommend it. And it's not casual moralizing. You know, I'm not suggesting that naive abstinence is the right solution, but we're not doing a good job communicating the fundamental values of life. And so it's been interesting to see what's happened with sex over the course of my lifetime. I mean, in the 60s, there was this idea, and it was probably the consequence of the birth control pill, that, well, maybe sex is free. And so people thought it's free and easy because, well, now pregnancy wasn't necessarily a consequence, and venereal disease was reasonably well under control, and so wasn't a blatant threat, certainly not a fatal one. And so people thought, why not free love? Well, I think the reason for that is it's complete rubbish. There's no free sex. It's too dangerous, physically and socially. Well, think of consent. When can you give consent? Well,
you're saying
the answer is we don't know. No,
or
under
like
what conditions? Well, what constitutes consent? What if you change your mind? What if you're intoxicated? What if you're stoned? What if you're upset? What if you feel you've been manipulated? You know, I mean, because the issue of consent is not, if the act is serious, and you can debate about whether or not that is, and people have their differences of opinion, certainly emotionally significant in all likelihood. So if it's significant, well, then consent is important. Well, what constitutes consent? Well, marriage does. So that's where sex was encapsulated fundamentally, because the consent was never an issue. I mean, there's all sorts of things that weren't an issue because of that. It wasn't like it was a magical solution to everything, but in the 60s, the idea was that sex could be casual. Well, AIDS pretty much put the end to that idea, at least in part, right? So, and it definitely spread as a consequence of promiscuity. That was definitely one of the driving factors that put AIDS everywhere. So that was not so good, to put it mildly. And then the reaction on campuses is, well, what constitutes consent? And the reason that has become questionable is because it's questionable, unless it's not serious. But I don't think that people really believe that. And so they might wish they believed it, but there's plenty of emotional damage done as a consequence of too quick intimacy. I think that's generally the case because in a partnership that becomes intimate, there's usually one person who's more emotionally invested than the other.